Coming up, meet extraordinary Indigenous people making a difference in their communities, from an Ojibwe puppet to rising young leaders. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from Indian country today.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
This is Indian Country Today.
Go'otsi Hopa. Thank you for joining us. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. On Wednesday, President Joe Biden said he will nominate a Navajo woman to serve as a federal judge in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California. If confirmed by the U.S. Senate, Sunshine Suzanne Sykes will become the first Native federal judge in California and the first Navajo federal judge. Sykes is currently a California Superior Court judge on the Superior Court of Riverside County, a position that she's held since 2013. She received her law degree from Stanford in 2001. Native leaders praised the nomination, including the National Congress of American Indians and the Navajo Nation. John Echohawk, executive director of the Native American Rights Fund, said in a statement, "Judge Sykes possesses excellent qualifications to be a federal judge. She has extensive judicial experience and a strong record of public service. We applaud her nomination and urge her confirmation." If confirmed, Sykes would be one of 5 Native federal judges. Nearly $19 million will soon be distributed to local, state, and tribal governments to help people weatherize their homes and lower their energy bills. This funding is coming from the Department of Energy and is part of President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law. It will aim to help tribal citizens, including some who pay up to 45% of their income on energy bills, according to the Energy Department. Ali Zaidi is the president's deputy national climate advisor. He says the funds will be available as soon as the start of next year.
So we're going to be pretty relentless here, making sure that every month of the year we're reaching out to folks, our partners, whether it's tribes or states or local governments around the country, and making sure that these programs scale up rapidly, and we're literally putting that money to work right now, right away, getting down to the business of saving people money on their energy bills.
Native families living in urban areas will also be able to apply through state and city programs. In Oakland, California, Wapapa's Kitchen has an Indigenous foods menu rooted in Chef Crystal's personal history to the Bay Area. ICT's Dalton Walker takes us to the restaurant.
On a sunny day in the Bay Area, an Indigenous restaurant is opening its doors to invite guests to experience a different taste. Yellow walls and different spices sit in a line on the shelves waiting to be prepared for cooking. Crystal Wapipa is the owner of Wapipa's Kitchen, and she says the purpose of this space is for her community.
And they want to eat their foods, and this is something that I feel that is very important and needs to be visible to our community, and also people just need to know that where our foods come from, and it comes from this land.
Wapipa was the first Native American Indigenous chef to be featured on Food Network's Chop TV in 2018. Crystal also says she's been getting a lot of positive feedback from customers.
The food tastes clean. I love to see our blue corn, for instance. We have the Hubbard squash. I just had an elder eat the venison corn soup, and she said it tastes like home.
Some of the meals Chef Crystal prepared include cranberry wild rice turkey balls, kickapoo chili, roasted turkey, and blue corn polenta. Joshua Hoyt, a line cook at Wapipaw's Kitchen, says being a part of this group is an opportunity he had to jump on.
The only way I was ever going to go back to the restaurant was to cook native food. And so when Crystal, presented me with an opportunity that exists maybe in a couple of places in the whole country, I couldn't resist.
With their new location opening up, Chef Crystal wants others to feel like they are home when they are tasting her foods.
We have so many different tribes that are here, and so when they do taste something back from home, it's like you can just, for me personally, when I have that sweet dry corn soup, I can close my eyes and I'm in my grandmother's kitchen, I want people to have the same feeling.
In Oakland, California, Dalton Walker, Indian Country Today.
And those are the headlines for Indian Country Today. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Coming up, we meet Indigenous creators and entrepreneurs and 2 organizations supporting new ideas and accomplishments. Stay with us.
This is Indian Country Today.
Leech Lake Ojibwe artist Michael Lyons created Buju Nana Buju, which is a puppet who teaches Ojibwe words through a YouTube live broadcast and on the radio in Bemidji, Minnesota. Let's take a look.
On New Year's Eve, it'll be the 1-year anniversary of our 1-hour daily live stream Ojibwe language podcast. And so what we do every morning is we get on, me and the lovely and talented Natasha. Ikadon Bujo, sweetie. Hey, everybody. Natasha is over here. And Michael, we get on every morning and we teach an Ojibwe word of the day. And I'll tell some stories. Sometimes I tell traditional Ojibwe stories like how Beaver got his tail. Or sometimes I'll tell stories like what happened between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And I don't even want to get into that, but we're here. But sometimes we tell celebrity gossip, but mostly it's a comedy show where we teach Ojibwe and talk about Ojibwe culture and language. When we started, Michael Lyons, he calls himself the rock star cartoonist. He had a comic strip called Ojibwe, which we should have called the show, huh, sweetie? I know, that's so dumb. But he had a comic strip called Ojibwe where he'd teach an Ojibwe word of the day. But then people started writing in and I was like, yeah, that's all well and good, but how do you say this word? So we got together, we said, hey, you know what? We should pronounce the words for the kids. But then just when I got on camera, I realized sometimes it's best to sing a song to learn a word. Like our very first podcast, the word of the day was coffee. But in Ojibwe language, we say black medicine water for coffee. So to say it, you would say, Makade mashkiki wabu. Well, that's hard for some kids. So I said, let's turn it into a song. Makade mashkiki wabu, makade mashkiki wabu, niwi eya, niwi eya. And then Natasha would chime in, and it was just sort of funny. And then it being a live stream, so we did little videos for a couple of years. But then this year, people could show up in real time and leave little comments and stuff. And we would get Native people from all over the country and even from other countries. There's a guy who shows up every day from Ireland who was adopted out of his tribe in Canada. And non-Indian people too show up.
Thank you, Buju Nana Buju and Michael Lyons. For 73 years, Natives in Rapid City, South Dakota have fought for ownership of some of the land that used to be part of an Indian boarding school. But as Stuart Huntington reports, the finish line is still just out of grasp.
In 1948, Congress doled out some 1,200 prime acres from the closed Rapid City Indian boarding school. None of them went to Natives, even though by law they were eligible. Not long ago, researchers unearthed potential deed violations on 3 parcels that brought the city to the negotiating table.
The boarding school land group and I have been visiting and negotiating around this issue for 5+ years. We're at the 26th mile in this marathon. we are so close to this finish line. The only thing left to know is whether we finish first or last.
Last year, the City Council asked for a draft plan to exchange land and money equaling $20 million to settle the deed violation claims. This week, the Council had its first chance to act on part of that plan when a Blue Ribbon Citizen panel recommended that the city give the boarding school land group $15 million to build an Indian center. The Council balked and tabled the idea until at least January. Land team members were saddened but not surprised and vowed to continue the push.
We're not giving up. This work is, the work of our ancestors and our grandmothers, centuries and decades into the making.
The fight for pieces of the boarding school land property is awash with emotion. Researchers identified unmarked graves of children who died at the school that operated from 1898 to 1933.
This fight, though, is for those children and is to make sure that they are always remembered, and is for this land here and to remind our community of our history.
So for now, the 7-decade wait continues until the City Council takes up the issue again. But the Council doesn't hold all the cards. The Indian volunteers can turn to the Department of the Interior, which by law retains the right to repossess parcels not used according to statute. This process, known as reversion, is few people's first choice for resolving the issues.
Going through a reversion process, I think that will be a setback, a major setback for race relations.
In Rapid City, South Dakota, this is Stuart Huntington, Indian Country Today.
The Bush Foundation announced a long-term investment for Black and Native communities this week. NDN Collective and Nexus Community Partners will steward community trust funds to address wealth disparities caused by historic racial injustice. NDN Collective leaders talked about this historic investment with ICT's Marionette Pember.
Over the past 2 years, and it was really since the death of George Floyd, sort of the uprising, the pandemic, the election, this political moment. And so what different foundations did was is instead of giving away the 5% of their endowments that they're required by law to do, they decided to borrow against some of their principal of their endowments to put more money on the street in this sort of political moment. And so the Bush Foundation was one of many foundations who did that. And so in addition to the normal roughly like $40 to $50 million that they do annual in grant making, they decided that they're going to put an extra $100 million on the street. And that 50 million of that was going to go to a black organization, and 50 million was going to go to an Indigenous organization. And they're framing these as steward organizations, and they're sort of framing this social bond as a community trust. It's not actually a trust. And its purpose really is to close the racial wealth gap in the tri-state area of the Bush Foundation that includes North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota, which is they only do grant making in those three states and the 23 Native nations that share the geography of those 3 states. And we've been selected as a steward organization. And the reason I say steward organization was that we get to design on what that looks like. We get to design what the process or what the mechanism looks like for closing the wealth gap. The only thing was that these grants are designed to go to individuals as opposed to re-granting to other tribes or to other nonprofits. That's not what this grant money is for. This grant money is to go to individuals and families within the tri-state area for the purpose of closing the racial wealth gap.
So over the course of the next year, we are going to design exactly what that looks like. And what it will look like is going to depend largely on a lot of the planning and feedback and design work that we'll do with community. So that will take place over the course of the next year so that we are able then to deploy these resources to individuals and families by this time next year, 2022. That's our goal. We're moving to like Q4 2022 of actual disbursement of those funds.
We recognize that Indian people organize themselves in their Tioshques, their Tuajes, their extended families. We expect that we're not going to eliminate the fact that when Tiwajes and Tioshpais decide to organize themselves in that way, we're not going to frown upon that. We're going to lean into it. We're going to lean into the indigenous ways in which people organize themselves. And a lot of people are raised up with a very community mindset in this tri-state area. And so we're not going to, our goal is to not build boxes around this idea. Our goal is to lean into what we know to be true as Indigenous people. And what we know, like, we don't want this to be another super regulated thing that just prohibits access. We actually want it to be the opposite thing, you know, and at the same time, we recognize that there's going to be more need out there than this, you know. Some people say $50 million. Oh, that's a lot of money. Well, you start even that up between 23 different Native nations and all the big land-based tribes that we have out here. It's a different scenario.
Part of this really speaks to the innovation of this opportunity with the Bush Foundation, putting the decision-making power of how this money can be most beneficial in community in the hands of community members and practitioners to benefit, in this case, Indigenous communities.
That was the staff from NDN Collective. When we come back, a Dakota artist takes us on a walk through history thanks to augmented reality.
This is Indian Country Today.
St. Paul, Minnesota welcomes a new piece of public art. It's called Dakota Spirit Walk and is located near the Mississippi River. It's not your usual sculpture. The app-based augmented reality creation uses geolocation, 3D animation, and audio to guide users along a nature path. Marlena Miles is the creative force behind the project.
I think a lot of young people might be familiar with the technology, sort of similar to Pokemon Go. So you're looking through the app, through your phone, through the camera lens, and it places these 2D and these three-dimensional artworks at GPS-based locations. And so when people travel along the Dakota Spirit Walk, they will meet these spirits and they'll tell them a story. They'll teach them about the history of the land. So it's sort of using the technology that kids are used to now to teach ancient stories.
Be mindful of your actions on this journey, for you are on sacred ground.
Dakota people, we have a creation story. So I took up 4 of the spirits. I took Grandmother Earth, Grandfather Stone, the Thunder Being, and the Water Serpent, and I placed them along the path just to teach sort of the different ways that human beings need to live in harmony with nature, because that area, it was a sacred site. It was also the home of our villages, but it was destroyed during the industrial age of the Twin Cities, and now it's being restored to its natural state. So it's kind of letting people understand that, you know, the past is significant, and even though certain things might have happened, like destroying those sites, we now have the ability to restore some of that. We don't often have access to our sacred sites anymore, or we don't, you know, legally own the land there for certain reasons. But I think augmented reality lets us, you know, put our stories, put our art, put our, you know, our cultures back at these sites without anyone being able to complain necessarily that, you know, we're somehow disturbing their space, you know. So I think I get a lot of Native artists reaching out to me these days asking how they can get into augmented reality too, because they all want to tell their stories at their land sites. And I think this lets us do that without, you know, disturbing our own sacred sites. We don't necessarily want to put a big art monument there. We don't necessarily want to put a big building there. We want people to hear these stories in a way that, you know, we have oral traditions. We don't necessarily need to write everything down, or we don't need to make monuments. So this lets us tell those stories and respect the land at the same time.
That was Marlena Miles. Each year, the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development honors 40 outstanding Native leaders under the age of 40. The award winners are American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian leaders who dedicate themselves to making significant contributions in their communities. Let's take a look.
Congratulations to everyone being honored. It is an incredible feeling to be in community, of having a banquet room of successful Indigenous people, each in our own way advocating to restore justice and reclaim space for our tribal nations.
Chris James, the president and CEO of the National Center, tells us more.
Absolutely. Well, again, we're so excited to have had our class of 2021 announced a few months ago and had our gala on last Friday night. So a few really, they're like you said, there's so many great leaders, and overall, we have had 520 leaders over the past 13 years. So that's pretty exciting. Just some highlights of this year's class. Rainey Williams, she's the legislative assistant to Representative Sharice Davids. We have Heidi Tocchini. She's senior advisor to Secretary Holland, Office of DOI. We had Angelina Casanova. She is the chairperson of Command Holdings, which is a tribally owned company. So that's just to name a few. We really strive to have a diverse, not only geographically, but a diverse population with where folks are from Alaska all the way to the East Coast, down in the South. So we really, the Southwest as well. And you're right. I mean, it's not just tribal leaders, and it's not just doctors and lawyers. We've had advocates and folks that focus on nonprofits. One in particular, Noah Blue Elk Hotchkiss, he has an organization, Tribal Adaptive Organization, and his organization works with folks with challenges or disabilities. So, I mean, we have so many great folks that have started nonprofits, have been business leaders, and who work for the tribe and are tribal leaders in their tribe, like Jordan Dresser, who's Northern Arapaho Tribal Chairman.
Chris James tells us how the award started.
In 2009, the award started with the National Center as a recognition. It was the National Center's 40th year anniversary, and to celebrate that 40th year anniversary, we decided to do 40 under 40 to go along with that. And really, just there wasn't a lot out there recognizing Native American specific 40 under 40. So that's why we felt to recognize business leaders and recognize tribal leaders and recognize doctors and lawyers and CEOs. And it really took off from there.
Thank you, Chris James from the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development. Nominations for the 2022 40 Under 40 Award open next month. New Yorkers are famous for thinking that Manhattan is the center of the universe, but to Lenape Indians, it's much more. It is their ancestral home. Today, their descendants want to reestablish a Lenape presence in Manhattan. Stuart Huntington has this report.
If you look around Manhattan today, it's hard to find traces of the rich Lenape culture that thrived there before colonial contact.
The Lenape were indeed very capable of being fierce warriors, but they were really known among their neighboring tribes as Mahumsak, the grandfathers. They were considered to be the wise ones, and their elder leadership was often called upon to mediate peace. So that's how important and distinctive the Lenape were.
But they were pushed ever westward, first by the Dutch, who built a wall around their colony that became Wall Street, and then the British, and then the Americans. Today's Lenape descendants live primarily on 5 reservations in Ontario, Wisconsin, and Oklahoma, and are all but invisible in Manhattan, save for a couple of land acknowledgement plaques, 2 monuments to the fictitious sale of the island to the Dutch, and a drawing on the seal of the city. The leaders of the Lenape Center want to change that.
Lenape Center was founded in 2009 in response to what we felt and experienced and saw as our complete erasure from this land, our ancestral land.
Our first decade of existence in Lenape Center has been to focus on cultural things, programming, as opposed to having a building. But now is the time when we're thinking about having a place where people can come visit and come stay and actually see the homeland and experience the homeland.
Today, the Lenape Center leaders are embarked on a campaign to raise the money and secure the land for a cultural center on Manhattan. Their first choice for a location? The last wild stand of forest on the island in Inwood Hill Park on the very northern tip of Manhattan. A cultural center, these leaders say, would honor those that were forced away.
So here we are in the center, the heart of Manhattan, is standing on this concrete among all these buildings. This is Lenapehoking. Our ancestors are still here.
In New York, this is Stuart Huntington, Indian Country Today.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Thank you for watching. For all the latest news and updates, visit IndianCountryToday.com. Stay safe, my relatives, and have a great weekend. I'm Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
This is Indian Country Today.